Good morning, everyone. Good morning and welcome. Welcome. Good morning if you are in the US. Good afternoon if you are in Europe, and good evening or late into the evening if you are in Europe. I think it's good morning in South America. So from all over the world, welcome, welcome. And my name is Dawn Dole. I am the Executive Director for the Taos Institute. And you have joined us for our Dialogue with the Author series. We do this about once a month to feature a new book that's come out, and we have a very exciting book to talk about today. Appreciative Inquiry as Daily Leadership Practice, Realizing Change, One Conversation at a Time, with Luke, Saskia, and Joeri. This is our newest Taos Institute publication, and we're really excited about it and so happy you were able to join us today. We are on a Zoom call, and it's actually a Zoom meeting, not a webinar, so you will be able to see everyone who's on the call if you choose to have yourself on gallery view. Because the first part of the dialogue today is with the authors, you may want to also put it on speaker view. So whoever is speaking is featured on your screen. So play around with that a little bit. We're going to keep everyone on mute during the call, except for the authors. And I just wanted to tell you a little bit about the Taos Institute. Some of you know the Taos Institute. Some of you are new to our institute, so welcome. The Taos Institute is a nonprofit educational organization. And our mission is to bring together scholars and practitioners who are concerned with social processes that are essential for the construction of reason, knowledge, and human value, and then their application in relational and collaborative and appreciative practices around the world. Constructionist theory and practice locates the source of meaning and value and action in the relational connection among people, and it is through this relational process that we create the world in which we most want to live and work. And we are in challenging times, and so the relational practices that we pay attention to are more important than ever. And I'm going to put a few resources, a few links in the chat for you so you can access a few more bits of information about the Taos Institute and some of the resources we offer. But I would like to jump right into our dialogue with the author today. And as you're coming in, please feel free to use the chat feature. Right now, a lot of people have put their name in the chat and where they're from, and I'd like to encourage everyone to do that. We've got people from the Netherlands and Belgium, the French Alps, London, Portland, Oregon, Toronto, Holland. Let's see where else. India, San Juan, California, another from India, Peru, England, Amsterdam, Mexico, Texas, Switzerland, Edinburgh, Canada, Charlotte, North Carolina, another from Canada. I mean, just goes on and on. It's so exciting to have everyone here joining in from around the world. And as you have questions throughout the program today, feel free to use the chat feature. And most of the chat we will be paying attention to towards the second half of our call when it's time for Q&A. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Luke, Saskia, and Joeri. Thank you so much to the three of you for joining our dialogue with the author today.
Thank you, Dawn. Hello, everybody. Welcome on behalf of myself, Saskia, and Joeri. We are excited for this opportunity provided by Taos Institute to have this dialogue and this online meeting. And thank you for so many of you to decide to show up. I mean, we all know that these times on screen time is probably for many of us a big part of our day. And so to decide at this moment to be at the screen and participate in this session, we're very grateful for that. My name is Luc Verheijen. I am part of Kessels & Smith, the learning company, living in Belgium. And related to the topic, I first got to learn about appreciative inquiry in 2002. And I'm still sometimes bewildered by the opportunities that have come onto my path ever since. And to mention just two of them is being able to organize and host the World AI Conference in Belgium in 2012, and recently being co-publisher of the International AI Journal together with Saskia, the journal AI Practitioner, and we do that together with the Copywriter Center. I will say a bit more about the program we designed for this moment, but for now I ask Saskia and then Joeri to introduce themselves.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Saskia, and I'm a colleague of Joeri and Lux and at Kessels and Smith. And for me, I think the first 10 years of my working life, I was combining work as a consultant and coach with work as a researcher at a university. And one of the things that were drilled into us is if we did research, we should not interfere with real life. We should leave it as undisturbed as possible, because otherwise we would have ruined the data. And one of the things that I like so much about AI is that it's a way of using curiosity, of using research, of using questions and the power of that to do disturb reality and to help people find energy and creativity to build the kind of team or organization or community that they would like to have, all using questions and research. Joeri.
Hi everyone, my name is Joeri and I'm a colleague of Luc and Saskia at Kessels and Smith, and I'm based in Amsterdam. And I learned about Appreciative Inquiry, I think, about 10 years ago. And it's very nice to see the person who introduced AI to me in this call, Diane-Marie Hosking. So thank you. I'm standing on your shoulders for introducing me first to Appreciative Inquiry as a student. And I think what I love most about Appreciative Inquiry is what we sometimes call the spirit of inquiry, to have really inquiring conversations, and that it enables us to really explore with curiosity. And yeah, that's also what I hope for this call today, that we can some of that with all of us.
So thank you, Saskia and Joeri. Now, as to why we wrote this book, AI as a Daily Leadership Practice, we have to refer to our second Dutch book on AI, which was published in 2016. And I mean, a year before that date, 2015, the Dutch publisher Boom approached us with the question to write a book about change and with managers as a target audience. And so everything was okay if change and managers would be in the title or subtitle. And for the rest, we got a carte blanche. So for us, the three of us, it was a great opportunity to reflect upon the work we have been doing for many years with AI in several and different contexts. So it was an opportunity to learn with each other, to reflect, to give words to our action theory, to elaborate methods further. And so the book has been published in Dutch in 2016 and is, I mean, we must say, doing very well. And when we talked about the book to our friends in international AI and Taos community, people encouraged us, why don't you translate it and open it up to a wider audience and add it to the body of knowledge of AI. So we did, and we're more than happy that Taos Institute agreed to be our publisher. So that's a bit about the why of the book. And what I would like to do now is to just give an overview of how we designed the session for this afternoon. We will start with just sharing a couple of our favorite stories out of the book, and then elaborate a bit further on how we learn to understand AI in the way we use it in our work. And in that way, you will get some glimpses out of the book, the perspectives we have written about, etc. After that, we would like to invite you to have some small group exchange, and we will organize breakouts in this Zoom. And in these small groups, you have the opportunity to choose out of a list of a couple of AI questions, the ones that speak most to you, and share a thought or a story to the people you will meet in the virtual breakouts. After that, we will reconvene, do a short poll, and then there's a possibility to use the chat to ask some questions, and we will reflect on a couple of those questions before we will do the checkout. So that's the overview of this afternoon, and as it says, it starts with some of our favorite stories. As in the book, we use a lot of examples, both in our private life as in our working life, and so we thought it's a nice way if we to start this session if we share some of these stories. And Saskia, you will kick that off.
Yeah. It was not easy choosing a story, but I think one of the stories that's closest to, one of the interventions that's closest to my heart is to create a history timeline with teams or with organizations or whole communities. And one of the stories of that is in the book, and it's about a team that when I got to know them, they had really just hit rock bottom. They had been through a lot. And as a result, they were quite divided as a group and did not have a clear sense of direction. And they got a new team leader who was actually, he was very motivated to start working with the team, but he was also a bit taken aback because he felt the team was not really on solid ground and he really didn't know where to start. And I didn't either. So we just said, okay, let's just not decide that for a moment, not try to look forward, but try to look back with the team. And what we did is we asked the group to stand in a big line, starting with the person who had been with the team the longest, all the way up to the person who had joined most recent, which was an intervention in itself because it sort of changes the order, and also people had to laugh a little bit as well. And then I basically asked the group, could you please imagine that we would write a book about this team? And could you then share which stories should definitely be in that book in order for it to be a book about your team, to tell the story of your team, but also for it to be a book that would help us as a reader understand what your team is about. And so they did, they huddled in small groups and they shared their stories first in the small group and then in the bigger group, and talking together, we sort of weaved the story of what had happened within the team and to the team in the last couple of years. And there was, of course, there were emotions as they recalled things that had happened, but there was also relaxation and really listening to each other, because we did not have to resolve anything. We did not have to look for ways out. There was just room for sharing. And that went on for quite a while. And at the end, I asked the question that has become one of my favorite questions. And it's the question, what would you like if you hear your own story, if you feel your own story? You could see it lying on the ground because we made it all visual, put the stories on little papers and put them on a big line. What would you like your next chapter to be? Which is a question which basically helps people and groups to become the author of their own story. And I remember at this particular time, there was one man, he was one of the oldest of the group, a very soft-spoken individual. And after a few minutes of silence, he took the floor and he said, well, this whole story has just made it very clear to me that a lot has happened to us. And as a result, we have drifted apart. When we used to be such a close-knit group, and there used to be friendship in this group. And what I would like for the next chapter is that we reclaim our friendship. And as a sentence in itself, it was meaningful, but it got its meaning because it was spoken in a situation where we had all just literally felt that story and understood what he was saying. In fact, he gave words to an emotion that was felt in a large part of the group. And it gave a sort of basis for the rest of the group to try to find its way. And there's, I find this somehow always happens when we create history lines. Sometimes it's with a big group, sometimes it's with a smaller group, sometimes it's with everyone in one room, sometimes it's asynchronous. But what always happens, and to me in a kind of magical way, is that the team sort of remembers things that are important for them to create their own future. And sometimes there are little stories that when they speak them, you think, how can this be an important story? But it always ends up being that way. So for me, it's a very beautiful illustration of what we call the poetic principle in AI. Yeah, that's what I wanted to share. And Luke, you have a completely different story of 2 kids in the back of a car.
Yes, thank you, Saskia. I don't know how it is with you, but when I reflect on how my action theory about change has developed, I can pinpoint to certain specific moments and experiences. And one of these moments is an experience with the kids in the back of my car. I have 2 children, a son 19 and a daughter 17. I enjoy watching them grow into the beautiful young adults they are now. And a few years back, I even had moments of doubt if that would ever be possible, since they had a lot, and I mean a lot, of fights together. And when I would address the fact they were fighting to them, the response I got was always pretty much the same. That was, but the other one started it. So reflecting on that reaction, the other one started it, it became clear to me that that's not an okay reaction, because not only does it say I'm not responsible for what is happening, but you also allow yourself to react in the fight in any way possible. I mean, the other one started. So I thought I need to find a moment to have a talk with them about that. One day I was driving with them, they in the back of the car, to a sports training session. And as it happened, they started to fight with each other. So I said to them, what is going on? And my daughter Noor said, well, Dries, my son, he started. And so I said, yeah, you know what? I hear that a lot lately. The other one started. And it made me reflect and come up with a question. And this is the question I want to ask to you. The question is, could it be that a fight occurs not due to the one who started it, but by the way the other one responds to it? Could it be that a fight occurs by the one who responds, not by the one who started it? And so they said, that's a difficult question. And I said, well, you know what? You have an experience. You just were starting a fight. How did it start? Well, Noor said, Dries said to me, the training outfit you were wearing is ugly. So I said, okay, that's the start. Now, Noor, how did you react? How did you respond? Well, she said, I said, if you look in the mirror, you will see that your face is even more ugly than my training outfit. And then it kind of escalated. So I said, well, let's play this one out. It starts the same way. One says, your training outfit is ugly. And we started to experiment and play out with alternative reactions, like, your taste is different than mine. So, and this playfulness, we discovered how this dynamics in a conversation work, and how it shaped my change theory is that it brings me to this whole notion of micro moves, small gestures with which you try and hope to build a conversation that is worthwhile to continue. And in any change context or project, I would even say, especially in those that are complex and difficult and unpredictable, I hold a firm belief that the essence lies in this most simple fact of micro moves, in this dance of gestures and responses. So the question becomes, how do I choose to respond? Which words do I use when I enter a conversation? So that's my story, and it's also in the book. Now, Joeri.
Thank you, Luc. I want to tell a different story related to a chapter that's in the book about questions. But the example actually isn't in the book yet because it was quite recent. And it's at a different scale as well. But it's about the power of questions in appreciative inquiry. And quite recently, I was asked to organize and facilitate a day for all the employees of a Dutch brewery that brews beer. and where we were to explore, it was called a dream day, where we were to explore the future of the brewery. And the managing director really hoped that people would come with their own ideas and sort of take ownership of the brewery itself. And one of the things we did, we had 500 people in the room in this big hall, which is something you can't hardly imagine anymore nowadays, but a few months ago that was still possible. And one of the first things we did is we asked people to have a very short appreciative interview in pairs. And you have to imagine that everyone was wearing their yellow coats of the brewery, and there were people who were in charge of packaging the beer, people who were the actual brewers, so all sorts of people, mostly men, I have to say, who mostly worked in that brewery for 30 or 40 years already. And in these short appreciative interviews, we asked them to ask each other 2 questions. The first question was, what was a moment when you were really proud of the brewery? And the second question was, what would you do if you were the managing director of the brewery? And what we saw was that the first question evoked emotions of positive emotions, of pride. But the second question, that was the one that really did it, that you felt the room buzzing and that people were a bit uncomfortable, like laughing it away. I'm not the managing director, nor will ever be. But once they went beyond that, it was a question that evoked energy and ideas. And also, in hindsight, that was the moment when people felt, you felt the energy shift in the room from it's something out there, the future of the company and of the brewery, to this is something I can contribute to. I feel empowered to think of ideas and take an initiative. And that was the whole point of the day. So if in hindsight we could sort of pinpoint it to that moment when people started asking that question, that you felt like, oh yeah, I can make a difference. And I think this story illustrates the difference we sometimes make in appreciative inquiry between positive and generative questions, where positive questions ask, which is the first one, what was a moment you were proud of, ask about when were we at our best, and those offer usually positive emotions, energy. But lately we've been working with generative questions more, which are questions, Gervais Bush, a fellow practitioner, says they have 4 criteria. They are surprising, they touch the head and heart, they make a connection possible between the people who are talking about that question, and they offer a new perspective. And I think all of that happened in this conversation with the second question, because they were somehow, people were a bit like, huh, what's happening? But in this context, this question about the managing director did it. And what I think as appreciative inquiry practitioners or art or craft is to choose those questions that for that particular group of people in that particular moment in time have that function. And if you would do that, ask this question in a totally different company or to a different group of people, it probably would not do it. So it's really about exploring and searching. In this instance, for instance, we tested this question with a design group we had, and we let them ask this question to others. So we sort of knew whether it was the right one, and to come up with this kind of generative question. And of course, sometimes you can think about them for a long time and test them, but there's also an art in, kind of crafting these generative questions in the moment, in conversation, like the example Luc just told. And that's also something I think you can try and practice. And in essence, this story illustrates for me that in appreciative inquiry, questions have the power to move people and to move systems. And then I mean move in the sense of touching you emotionally, but also moving your thinking or moving you into action. And that's the story I wanted to share for now. And then I think we also go to the next part of this session after 3 stories. And in these stories already we say something about our understanding of appreciative inquiry, but we'd like to continue a bit more on that, because already the title of our book, Appreciative Inquiry as a Daily Leadership Practice, but also the part of changing one conversation at a time, says something about how we understand appreciative inquiry. and especially on a principle level. And we'd like to focus a bit more on 3 of those foundational or underlying principles by asking a question to each of us. And I'd like to start by asking Luc a question, because there is often an idea that appreciative inquiry only focuses on the positive. And especially in times like these, where we are in now, which a lot of is happening, it's very challenging. Is appreciative inquiry made for these times, do you think, Luc? And how does that relate with the positive or negative?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Joeri. It's an interesting one, and also one we got from one of the participants. She emailed the question, or he emailed the question, or she, before we started this session. Together with Lindsay Godwin, I wrote a little foreword for the upcoming issue of the AI Practitioner Journal about the topic of grief and growth. That issue is, I saw that Nina is on the call, and she is a wonderful guest editor making this issue come to life. It will be online next week. And together with Lindsay, I wrote a little preface which is called AI is Made for Times Like Ours. And writing it, it reminded me of an experience I had in an AI learning network, a certificate program we facilitated at the time of the financial crisis in 2008. And after a couple of days working and learning with AI, people said, like, you know, we understand how this AI works and look at your best moments and high point stories, but what to do with AI when times get tough, because we live in tough times. And so the kind of belief or conviction behind that question was that AI is not meant for times that are tough. And, you know, like I want to offer another perspective, and we tried to answer these questions. The question came back. So as facilitators of the learning network, we decided we don't need to answer, we need to provide an experience. So we asked people to form small groups, to have a conversation with each other based upon the following question that sounds a bit like, you know, in life you have high moments and not so good moments. So for now, please think of a moment in your life that stands out as a difficult period. A period that was stressful, maybe even tragic. And of course, respectfully, you choose the story you want to tell. And we are curious to know how you managed to grow from that moment, to get through the moment in a way it maybe even made you stronger. So what gave you courage to go on? What made you persevere? What has become stronger in you and your life? And people started sharing these stories with that focus. And I must say that the mutual respect and the connective power of that moment has stayed with me as a key moment in my practice of AI. So Joeri, in answering the question, that is one of the thoughts.
And can you perhaps say something about how that experience, how you can see that being relevant now again today in this current crisis we are in?
Yeah, the experience, and if I link it to now, it made me aware is that AI is made to help us address challenges, not ignore them. Like, oh, we do AI as if nothing is going on in the world. Nor to wait for times to get better, like, oh, you know what, we can go back to AI when our times get better. I don't believe that. I really believe that AI is made to help us to address challenges and to learn and to grow out of these challenges. And I think that it are, in fact, the underlying principles of AI that provide us inspiration in how to use AI in these times. So,
because if I listen to your example, and it's also actually in the book of the inquiry with your learning network about challenging moments, then it was directly addressing those moments, but then also learning from what keeps you afloat in those moments. So that's something of and the appreciative side to it is more about seeing what helped you or what enabled you to come through those moments.
Yeah, exactly. It is, it is being very respectful for what people feel in the times they are living in, and at the same time, for the inquiry you're doing, directing them to those stories they can learn from and they can grow into. Like, for instance, if you look at the constructionist principle, it reminds us that our words create our worlds. So it invites us to intentionally choose the words as they create realities. So we talk about social distancing now in these times. We can ask about social distancing, but you can also talk about how in times of physical distancing, we need new ways to radically socially connect. That's a different kind of angle and topic. So it is having respect for what we feel, the anger, the anxiety, the helplessness, and at the same time, ask different types of questions. Questions like, what self-care am I doing today? Or how can I use my strengths and my privileges to help others? So these are really different types of questions. And I think that that's one of the invitations of AI in these times. It is exactly to use in these times, and as a practitioner of AI, to be aware what inspiration AI and the principles give you to choose the questions you use to enter a conversation.
Thank you, Luc, for sharing this story.
Yeah, and maybe while talking, there's a last thought, Joeri, that is what I discover in times like these is that we are confronted with such a massive complexity that we just don't know. I mean, there's a lot of information, there's data, but we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know how our summer holidays will be. We don't know how September will look like. And my belief is that if we don't know, then we can truly embrace the stance of inquiry. Then we can embrace the stance of inquiry to be open to new ideas, new perspectives, new meanings. And if you in that inquiry can appreciate or value sincerely everything that emerges, all the new possibilities that we can create, I believe that's for me the timeless essence of AI. So that's the one I wanted to add.
Thank you.
It's nice, Joeri. It's a nice bridge, actually, to the question that we had prepared for you, which is on being AI. I mean, we can talk about how to do AI and AI interventions, but I think it's actually, Ron Fry mentioned it also in his foreword for our book, which made us more aware of it, that being AI is so important. How would you describe your way of being AI?
Yeah, I think in general, I realized in the past years that actually my being, but also when I looked at other practitioners who practice AI, that somehow their being made such a big difference in how the space for inquiry was created and what became possible. And I was really intrigued by that, because your being it's quite, intangible to sort of, see or give words to what that is. And it's been my own quest for the past few years to explore how can I develop my being as a practitioner. And what I learned is that there are some ways when you can practice it. Something I've been really intrigued by the idea of wonder and a sense of wonder as a way of seeing the world and people in it differently. And my understanding of wonder is seeing the extraordinary within the ordinary. And that's something I can practice, and that influences my way of being, I think. And one of the practices that's become most important for me in the past years is, since 5 years ago already, I started to go on a daily morning walk. And at first, I didn't know how much of a difference this would make to my practice, but I just went out wherever I woke up for 30 minutes with the intention to really appreciate and look around me. And sometimes I think of it as foraging for small glimpses of beauty, not for food, but for somehow something beautiful in my daily surroundings. And I take one photograph each morning of something that I really think is beautiful. And I think it was really interesting that I started to notice after a while that this influenced my being, but also how I showed up in my practice. And one story that comes to mind is, one morning I was driving to a team I was facilitating in higher education. and I only met a few people of them, and I heard a lot of stories about them, that they were this complicated team, that they, Saskia, you were involved in this at the start as well.
I know exactly which team
yeah.
you mean. Yeah.
and they were performing badly. They weren't, their teaching wasn't good. They weren't involved with the students. And when I was driving after my daily morning walk to this team session, I caught myself and I was thinking, oh, I'm stuck into this story. And can I really intentionally choose to bring my own sense of wonder to this group of people? And for me, that's about seeing their possibility and beauty, but it's also about really questioning the sort of assumptions and stories and trying to see them anew with fresh eyes. And I did, and actually it was a team that had a lot of potential and that actually wanted to inquire and had passion. But I felt in this particular instance that, of course, it wasn't all me, but that it made a difference that I started the day not as another consultant that came in that wanted to change them, but someone who was really interested to learn about their perspective and thought of them in an open and curious way. And that's then sort of my way of being AI, or trying to be AI in a way.
Yeah. And you practice that in a very deliberate way with your morning walks, and you called it foraging, for moments of wonder or glimpses. So what do you do then? Do you go out and with your camera try to catch that moment? How would you describe that process? How do you practice a sense of wonder?
Yeah, I'm really deliberately not trying to go out there to catch it, but to be really open and to see. Yeah, I think if you take the word foraging, if you look it up in a dictionary, it says wandering in search of food. And I think for me, it's also more in search of wild food. For me, it's a sort of wandering where I'm literally sort of going away, not sure where my feet will take me. And then suddenly, when I'm not looking for it, something beautiful emerges. And it's a very thin line, because the moment I do think I need to look at it this way, I need to find this beautiful thing, it doesn't happen. And what I find intriguing is that in a walk, it's very tangible. But the same sort of gesture of going into work with a team or with a group, for me, it also applies that if I go in and think, oh yeah, in this group, they will do this, even if it's a positive assumption, it really helps for me to sort of let go of all these expectations and almost radically choose to be curious and open with the group I work with.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, Saskia, there's also a question for you. One of the first ever articles you wrote about AI was together with Joeri, and you both have chosen to give it the title Changing with Energy. So somehow you made the connection between AI and energy. Can you say something more about that connection?
Yeah. I remember you just in the beginning of the talk, Luke, you recalled learning about AI through David Cooperrider, and I have the same experience. I literally remember where I was sitting when I was reading one of his articles, and the sentence that stood out for me was that AI is about what gives life to a system, and somehow that touched a nerve, and I understood it then, but not really. And I feel I understand it better now, but still not really. But it's something that attracts me very much to AI, that when you work with groups or with people, that somehow when you strike the right chord with each other, or you get into the right vibe, something comes to life, and it creates energy to create your own future, to build your community the way you would like it, or your team the way you would like it, or your organization. And
how do you see that energy? What is energy for you?
Energy, I think, is a very tangible thing. So if you see people get into action and are enthusiastic about what they are going to try to do and what they hope they will find out, I like that energy a lot. And I remember an article by Gervais Bush, which helped me a lot in that respect, because he made a difference between the reflective kind of inquiry that you can do in AI with defining the topic, discovery interviews on beautiful moments, dreaming. And there's also this kind of inquiry by doing energy, which is in the design phase or in the destiny phase, where you end up experimenting. And I think for this inquiry by doing, it's a way of experimenting, and sometimes it's the only way to understand the system, whether it's your class and you're a teacher, or whether it's how to navigate the market in these times, or whatever. A lot of the time systems are so complicated we cannot predict them, so we can only understand them better by inquiring into them, by probing, by experimenting. And it's quite a thing, I think, in our culture of performance, where we are so focused on doing stuff and getting a result, to create a space for really experimenting and learning and probing, and learning to understand how the world works in that way. And we need energy for that, and a little bit of courage and trust. And one of them, I think we quoted her, at least I know we quoted her in our book. Jane Dutton wrote about high quality connections, how some connections leave you energized and enthusiastic and courageous enough to take next steps. And I liked that a lot. Just recently I read an article on how some people are energizers and others are not, and that sort of didn't sit well with me, because I truly believe that everyone can be an energizer or create energizing moments, as long as we are aware of the questions we ask each other, the way we connect, and also the space we make to experiment. I'm often amazed by what happens in a team, even a team that is run down a bit or lost its way. The aliveness that comes back if you create a sense or even an infrastructure for experimenting. Say we're going to do 5 experiments. We have in-between spaces where we can reflect on them and build further. Yeah.
So as you emphasize this doing as another way of being related to each other, and it is in the doing also the relationship evolves again, exactly. And maybe it sometimes needs the doing again to come to a next step of developing with each other.
And it's a way of inquiry. It's doing is not only the implementing or the executing. Doing is also inquiring. Building something, trying something out, see what happens. Yeah.
Okay.
I like that element of AI. Well, just as much as I love the others, but yeah.
Great. Thank you for bringing that to us. And with these previous stories, and now talking some more about elements of AI that are part of the way we understand it, we kind of come to an end of this first part in bringing some of the content of the book to you all. Yeah. And we now want to move to a second kind of a different energy part, and Saskia, you're going to introduce that one.
Yeah, so we'd like to, instead of just talking about AI, we would also like you to experience a bit of AI. And Dawn, you will help me with this one, right? By sending out the handouts in the file, in the chats. So what we are going to do is we're going to make small breakout rooms where you will meet 3 or 4 other people. It's very easy. You can just click join room whenever that message appears in your screen. And we have prepared a little handout. Dawn has sent it to you via email, but she will also send it right now in the chat. You can download it now. You should do it before you join the breakout room, because otherwise it's gone. And in that handout, you will find 5 possible questions. And we would like to invite you to just choose one that speaks to you and answer that question and share that answer with the group. And it may be that all 5 of you have a different question. It doesn't have to be the same. Just pick out the question that speaks to you and share the answer. And that's the invitation. You have about 20 minutes before we will call you back for the last part of this webinar. infrastructure thing, I find it very important, crafting the questions and crafting the infrastructure, because it will just give you time and time to settle in a different mode of experimenting and working together. And when it comes to questions, one of the nicest experiences I've ever had with this design phase was when I was a participant then, and we were asked the question, if you were to design a new organization that would be everything you have ever dreamed of, it would even be outside of this one, you could just start all over again, you design your own competitor, if you will, and what would it look like? It would be an organization where you would like to work tomorrow. What would it look like and what would it do like? And it was very inspiring to see how somehow that little frame change opened up all of our creativity and made it much easier to design something. Well, if everything is possible, then I would create it like this. And that was exactly what we needed, because it became our new North Star to sort of focus our efforts and our inquiries on. I don't know if that's helpful. That's what came to mind.
Okay,
and I see another.
Overwhelmed by the questions. Let's. There's one. I mean, about management and convincing of coworkers, and I mean.
Can you rephrase the question, Luc, so we know what you're?
Yeah, it says that there's one question is, how can I effectively convince my coworkers to do something in a new way? That's the one, and maybe it also relates to the management question. It makes me think about a quote I once learned that said that people don't resist change, but people resist being changed. And for me, that's always the difficult thing when I work with leaders or managers and they ask me or they ask us to use AI in order to let people then obtain the goals they as managers define. And that are the contexts that I will ask and have a conversation with these managers, and I will be kind of hesitant, or will be completely hesitant, to use AI as a way to make people do what the manager wants. Because for me, that's the great thing, especially in these whole systems processes with AI. The whole idea is that you broaden the circle of strategy building. And so the ones who define strategy is not anymore the boardroom, but you invite stakeholders who have an interest in the topic, who have a curiosity in the topic, who have experiences about the topic. You invite them in the strategy in the circle of inquiry, envisioning new futures, using energy to prototype and try out new things. And that's something else, I think, than convincing. And the meeting is that if we do these whole system summits, you can see people, as also what I hear Ron Fry often say, you can hear people thinking when they enter the room, the last thing I want is more work. And they leave the room with more work because they decided to do the work. And so that's the whole idea with this thinking about AI and participation. We know a lot of participative processes, and a lot of the time they end with ideation. People have given the ideas, they are thanked, and now other people are going to decide upon which ideas to execute. And that's what way AI as a way of participation goes a step further. People are not only able to think, they are able to decide, they're able to take responsibility, they're able to act. And what they need is track and fanning. What they need is being supported in the things they want to work upon.
Okay. Joeri, is there a question that catches your eye?
Yeah, several, but I see one from Frida where she says, I find it sometimes difficult to create a safe space where people see the value of conversations. And if managers or groups are asking for tools, how can you create space for that they see conversations as valuable? That's how I understand this question. And I think also in my own experience that sometimes appreciative inquiry isn't as tangible for people, especially when you try to explain it. So maybe a simple answer to this question would be to always try and create an experience as early on in the process as you can think of. Even if it's in a, I don't know, if you're invited to sketch an approach or an idea for a management team, to even there ask one question, like about an appreciative question to answer there with each other, or to really very briefly invite people in pairs to have that short appreciative interview with each other, and then continue talking about what could this look like in our organization. And it's maybe a simple trick, but one that always seems to work, that when you talk about appreciative inquiry, it can stay a bit like, how does this actually work, or how is this valuable, or what does this add? But once you've experienced it, however shortly or small, then suddenly most people do see the value of it. That's maybe one answer. And the other answer is also relates a bit to your answer question to Saskia about creating an infrastructure. I think also for the whole AI process, even though you don't yet know what the content of the conversations will be, you can create an infrastructure that makes it, for clients who are not used to having conversation at the core of a change process, to at least have something to hold on to.
Yeah, nice. It's also relates to SEN. Yeah.
Can I also throw a question to you?
Yeah.
It's about what I read about AI, and now the experience we all have of working remotely of each other, and to find new ways of connecting. I know that you have been doing a lot of work in that and paying attention to that. Can you tell something about your experiences? Yeah,
actually, it's maybe also an answer to Herman's question on an example of what you can do as a manager. I've been helping a few managers lately with their teams being remote, and they found that when they had their team meetings, they would be suddenly completely devoid of any personal contact and very fact of the matter. And what we did with some of those teams is create team checkups, where we had a bit like we did it in the meeting of today. We had people break up in little pairs and choose which question they would like to answer with their teammates. I think Niels had a question, what is the magical question? And I saw someone respond, how can you decide for someone else? I can really feel that, especially in times where you don't have a long phase in which you can really look for what will be the topic of our inquiry. I find it very helpful to think of a couple of questions that may all work, in the sense that they can all be generative, they can all be connecting, like Joeri explained in her example, and have the people invite the people to have small conversations on the questions that they find energizing. And sometimes they choose their rough moments, and sometimes they choose their sparkly moments. And they can reflect on the qualities that they bring to those moments and how to make them occur further. Just keep it very simple and small, do only the discovery basically, but I found that it set a lot of emotion, and that people value the energy that comes from it, but also the sense of connection that comes from it a lot, even maybe more than in normal times. As one of the enthusiasts, she wants to set up blind dates with people also from different teams, connect them, try to see if people be connected to other people at random in the organization, and sort of play with the questions also a little bit. Yeah.
All right, will we do one more question and then go to the closing of this dialogue with Joeri? Is there a question you would like to say something about or reflect upon?
Not immediately one that comes to mind. There's so many to read through, but if you have one, you can have a go, Luc.
Well, the question on the epilogue, which someone says, René says, in the epilogue it states that the difference is made by the quality of interplay and the quality of the joint cooperation in projects. And then it says, reconnecting daily is enabling people to develop this quality interplay. Can you share some stories? I guess, Saskia, the story you were sharing is an example of that. The whole premise of our view on appreciative inquiry is that it's such a relational practice. The action is in the interaction. And so every time there's the question to you, how can I contribute positively to a more generative cooperation or collaboration? And if people experience that, if they also experience your intention and your gesture, I mean, the meaning, you will see it in the response, but the chance that people will tap into your invitation and feel your sincere invitation, then there's again a next step in the interaction. And it is kind of, again, that interplay of micro moves with this sincere intention of the question you ask, the curiosity you bring. For me, that is what establishes the quality of the relationship.
So AI as a daily leadership practice to me is also what I call AI in het klein, AI in small. So we have the big AI with the bigger change processes and the development projects that take a couple of months or years even. But you also have AI in the small everyday moments. I really like the book by Jackie Stavros and Sherry Torres on Conversations Worth Having. I see other great book tips in the chat. We will make sure to put them on the Ning because it's worthwhile to share. And this is one that they really focus on how you can make small interactions in the daily work environment and take them to go in a direction that's energizing and connecting. And I've worked as a school leader for 1.5 years and found that I really, like Joeri trained her sense of wonder, or trained, it's not training, but it's cultivating or practicing your sense of wonder. I felt you could also practice your sense of being inquiring. And,
yeah, in that sense, that's for me an important one, is that if we say as a daily leadership practice, with the word leadership, we not refer to people in a formal leadership position. We refer to every human being who is a leader, a leader of your life. And the kinds of decisions you make in your everyday encounters, be it at my kitchen table when we have dinner tonight, or when I meet colleagues tomorrow, or when I have a talk about a project next week. I mean, these are all encounters where I can show up as a leader and intentionally act from an appreciative inquiry perspective.
Thank you, Sue, for putting the title of the book by from Jackie and Sherry in the chat. It's really worthwhile.
Yes. So I will jump in here, and as we're getting ready to close, I want to thank Luke and Saskia and Joeri so much for sharing your book and your stories today, and thank everyone for joining us for this dialogue with the author. I would also invite all of you to continue this conversation online. We have a website that we call the Taos Institute Online Learning Platform. It's a conversational space, and we've created a dedicated page for this conversation. I did put it in the chat already, but I'm going to put it in the chat again just so you all have it and can go to it. It's taoslearning.ning.com, and you'll need to register for that website, which is no big deal. So just go ahead and register and then click on that page, and you can continue the conversation. We have, the authors have agreed to come into that space for a while and answer your questions. So a lot of the questions in the chat that did not get answered today, please feel free to go to that space and continue the conversation there. We also have this dialogue with the author series once a month, so be looking for other announcements of other books that we're going to be exploring. And I think that's all I have. Just so Saskia and Luke and Joeri, do you want to just come on and we can give you a praise and thank you so much and applause for being here and sharing your wonderful book and wonderful stories with us. And thank you all for joining in today.
Well, thank you, Don, for inviting us and making this first webinar type thing a good experience. Thank you, everyone. And have a good day wherever you are.
Yeah.